The COVID-19 pandemic was isolating, as people faced lockdowns and limited contact with others. For vulnerable senior citizens, this was a particularly frightening time that took a toll on their overall well-being, especially their mental health. The Anubhav project arose during this time of crisis, giving senior citizens a platform to share their experiences through radio and podcasts. My name is Siobhan Hull, and welcome to Capturing Experiences, a series produced under the guidance of Ms. Pooja Marada, in which I interview experts involved with the Anubhav project. A special thank you to those who made the Anubhav project possible, including Vigyan Prasar, the National Institute of Social Defense, and the SM Sehgal Foundation, which has been involved with community radio since it launched Alfaze Mewat in 2012. Today, we are joined by Ms. Saisudha Sugavanam, who helped to lead the Anubhav project at Nightingale's Medical Trust. I guess the first question that I was just curious about is if you could briefly introduce yourself and just explain what your role in Anubhav was in the program.
Okay, so my name is Saisudha, and I started my career as a college student by being a part of the community radio which Dr. Sridhar started. So I was the first person to go on air. So I have the idea of community radio holds a very special place in my heart. And then I moved on to work for the British Broadcasting Corporation. And then after that, I stopped working for radio and I did many other things. And then Dr. Sridhar reached out again and he said, it's high time you come back to radio and do something. And for me personally, Dr. Sridhar has been my mentor and he's done lots for me. And I was just looking for an opportunity to give back. And it's been a wonderful experience. I worked with the Anubhav team on both the projects. One is imparting science and technology education for senior citizens. And the second one is setting up a community radio podcast station exclusively for senior citizens, managed by senior citizens. That I worked on both these projects.
I appreciate that background. So I imagine your extensive experience with community radio was really helpful in working on the Anubhav project. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, why you think it's important for elderly citizens to have spaces to share their experiences and their stories.
Yeah, so I don't know. I also, my parents are senior citizens. I have in-laws who are senior citizens, and I interact with quite a lot of senior citizens. And it's always a struggle. I'm like, why don't you guys get me? Or why don't you do this? And, why are you so picky? And that's been my personal experience with senior citizens, to be honest. So when I did this project and when I worked with a lot of them, and there were also a lot of medical professionals who came and spoke, and they said, when we did episodes on senior citizens' mental health, dementia, and how they, what happens to them physiologically, it made me a lot more tolerant and more accepting of, they're aging and they have their own challenges. And they're not my peers. And if I can be compassionate to my children, I can be compassionate to senior citizens as well. It's the same space. Children are growing and I need to be a lot more flexible. And with senior citizens, they've grown older and I need to be a lot more flexible. That's what it did to me.
So something that you were talking about is that, through the experience of doing this project is gaining some compassion for the senior citizens. Do you think that's something that the listeners of the podcast gained as well? How do you think the podcasts affected the people who got to listen to them?
There was one person who spoke about life skills, about her childhood experience, about how she met this lady who's in her 80 years of life. She's only met with tragedies throughout, having lost her two children and a husband, and then another son, older son, and his child. She's been through all of this, But in spite of all of that, she would always have a smile and be very grateful for everything that she's received in her life. I think that particular episode got a lot of response from the listeners saying, it moved me to tears, and if she could appreciate life in spite of all that she's been through, I can certainly appreciate life as well. Was the broad message from that. It's something that left a very lasting impression for the listeners. So there are many such stories like that. Also, there was one lady who's a dancer and a dance teacher for senior citizens, and she's 70 years old. And she learned dance when she was 50. And her role model was her daughter. So that episode also was a big hit in this sense. A lot of people said, there's no age limit to learn a new skill, and there is no age limit to perfect it and teach others as well. So that was also something that was very popular. I think all these episodes motivated the listeners, gave some perspective to, I'm also at the end of the day a consumer, and it widened my perspective. I'm sure they also it must have also impacted the listeners in this way.
Those both sound like really powerful stories. Are those the two that stand out the most in your mind, or are there others as well that have really stuck with you?
Yeah. So with the science and technology part, there was one episode we did on death. So each person spoke about, death is inevitable for all human beings. And especially when you're a senior citizen, you're closer to death than other people. So what are all the things that you need to think of, and how do you make peace with it? And it was a very interesting episode.
That does sound like a very interesting topic. At least where I'm from in the US, it's not something we talk about very often.
Exactly. So considering the taboo around a topic like this, we had a mental health professional for the discussion, and the way it was moderated and the way all of them spoke about their fears and what they had, and the mental health expert also spoke about why that fear arises and what needs to be done, how can you address it. So very interestingly, it's not just about what will I do with what will happen to my family or what will happen to this. It's also about carrying a lot of guilt and things like that. So he taught them some techniques on resolution and things like that.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a powerful conversation to have between people. It seems like the Anubhav project was a platform for having lots of really powerful and interesting conversations. Did you notice any changes in the community or in the senior citizens before and after the project?
Like the listener response that I'm talking about were all people who just wrote back listening to it. It's not like we knew the listener and not that they were all regular listeners or anything like that.
What kind of responses did you receive though from these people who were writing to you?
Like I said, it was heart-wrenching, helped me understand a new perspective. And these are broadly the kind of response that we received.
Okay, that sounds like a very positive response to the project. Another question that I wanted to ask you is if there's anything that surprised you the most about the Anubhav program that you weren't really expecting coming into it.
The enthusiasm. I really didn't. A lot of senior citizens were very welcoming, and they were very keen on sharing their experiences. I really didn't know that, they were actually looking forward for an opportunity to share their experiences. That was an eye-opener for me personally.
Thank you so much, Ms. Saisudha, for sharing your perspective. Today, we heard how the Anubhav project allowed senior citizens to inspire others through their stories. Senior citizens embraced the opportunity to share their experiences, and podcasts provided them with a platform to do so. Thank you for listening to this episode of Capturing Experiences.